Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for April 17th, 2026. I'm Benji Fisher, sharing my screen and moderating, and also present are Ralph Kohler, Gareth, Balavi Singh, and Simo Helston. Thanks all for joining. And we thought we would return to this issue, which we looked at in a couple of recent meetings a few weeks ago. For the sake of the recording, the issue number is 2906568. Provide users with the option to select an appropriate moderation state when reverting to a previous revision. Um, so I guess to illustrate the problem, I've installed Umami on the current main branch of Drupal. I've shared the link in the Zoom chat, and as usual, the super secret credentials or admin. And since I installed Umami, I already have the content moderation module enabled. Let me just double check that. Um, Content moderation, yes. And also something that's tripped me up in the past. Let me make sure that um, the editorial workflow is enabled for various content types. Haha! That's, oh, content type, article, basic page recipe. Okay. So yes, it is enabled for all of those. So if I then go to create, say, a basic page, um, and I'm going to make 3 revisions of this page. I want the first one to be published. And let me also put in a revision log message.
Benji,
Yes.
make the first one not published, make it a draft. Because the gist of the
Oh,
issue is basically that if the first version is a draft, then the second is published, and then you revert to the first, that it's immediately published again. That is the initial motivation for that issue.
you're right. Okay, so I'm keeping it as a draft. I'll save that. I'll then edit and make a second revision. And this one will be published. Published. And then I will look at the revisions of this page. I have the current revision, which is published. I have the older version, which is a draft, and I'm going to revert to that draft. And I say yes on the confirmation form. And now I have a draft version, a published version, and then another draft version. And the suggestion of this issue is that as part of that workflow, I have the option to choose a revision state. So if I wanted to revert to that draft and publish it, then what would I have to do? Um,
No. Could you please click the link 13th April 2026, 10:08, 10:08?
17 April.
70, yeah.
That takes me to yes.
Its moderation state is draft.
Right, the moderation state is
Yeah.
draft, and I can make it
Because,
published.
but yeah, if you take a look at the issue, the reasoning there was that basically if you click revert, test v1 is immediately published and tweaking it first is not possible.
Okay, so just let's have another look at the current workflow. Um, look at the revision now. I should have four revisions, and it goes draft, published, draft, and published.
But could you revert another time to the version 1, please?
Okay, so this is the draft version, so I'll revert again, and that will still be unpublished. That will still be a draft.
And ah, but is it editable, that draft?
Um, yes, I should be able to edit it. Um, I guess there isn't a link to do that from here, but if I go back to the revisions page, um, I can choose edit from the drop-down menu, which don't want to get distracted, but it's with the blue edit button here. This is somewhat discoverable. Without something to draw attention to it, these three dots are really hard to find. You have to know it's there. But yes, I can edit it. Um, this is actually the fourth revision, and I could publish it from here.
Okay. So basically, the problem and motivation is obsolete in that initial issue that provide users with the option to select an appropriate moderation state.
Um, no, I don't think it's obsolete. I think they instead of creating the third version by reverting and then publishing it, they want to do that in one step, which you can't do currently. It has to be a two-step process currently. Um, I guess maybe the more serious problem is if I take a published version and revert to that. Um, yeah, that's actually
Not possible.
no, I can do that, but it's going to be problematic because as soon as I do that, the current revision is going to be overridden. So let's see. So this is the currently published version. This is node/20. And if I were to take another published version and revert to that, um, I might 3 seconds later make a draft out of it. In fact, I'll go ahead and do that. I guess I have to edit it. So this is actually version 6, isn't it?
Yeah. But still, I think in steps of the reproduce, point 5 is still obsolete. The point you've outlined right now, that is valid, but the other one I still think is not.
Let's see, one, two, three, four, five, six. Oh, it was actually version 7. I was off by one. Um, but since it was a two-step process and I now have these two revisions, um, the this one that I created by reverting the earlier published draft overrides. And now if I look at node 20 again, if I just reload this page, instead of test page v1 draft, it'll say test page v2 published. So that that seems like a problem. That seems like an argument for making it a one-step process. Ralph, go ahead.
Um, could you maybe go to the Cloudflare link I've shared with the merge request applied and test the same? Because I think maybe that doesn't go into the micro copy and wordsmithing I've attended. Such apologies for today, but I wonder about the question with the should there be a select form or not? Would it make sense based on the moderation state of the revision a node is reverted to? If it basically is already published, then show that select element, while if it is not, don't show it. So only in case it could happen that it's an immediately publishing of the change could take place, then add that select form as a failsafe. Otherwise, don't show it.
Let's hold the suggestions for changes
Yeah.
for a little while. Let me run through it again. And before I run through it again, Gareth, Plavi, Simo, do any of you need clarification on what we're looking at here?
Mm. I've seen this issue before, so I'm fine.
Okay. Okay, so let's see. You've already set up the workflows.
Yeah. Yep.
Let me just double check that briefly. Content moderation, and it's enabled for article and basic page. So I'll go and create a basic page. Version 1, draft, version 1, draft. Um, Save as draft. So is this part of the merge request that,
No, that is basically the chin theme
okay.
we're looking at.
So it's the same drop down, it's just not in
Yeah,
the same position as it
exactly.
was. Okay, so I'm saving a draft version, and then I'm going to edit it and make it published. Published, and save. And then I'll go to the revisions page and revert that draft version. And here I have the option to select a moderation state. So that's what this adds. So shall I keep this as a draft?
Yep.
Okay. So I'll revert that. And since it was a one-step process, I don't have that intermediate revision created. And I could also take this Well, actually, let me go ahead and um, actually let me edit it. So this will be version 4 published.
Still draft.
I'm going to publish it.
Okay.
Go back to the revisions page, and now I have two published revisions, version 2 and version 4. And I'm going to revert version 2. And because I have this drop-down list, I can choose a different moderation state for it. And I have not changed uh, what, say, anonymous visitors to the site will see. Um, they see version, right, they see version 4, the published version, because there's no more recent published version. Okay, so now is the time for discussing whether this is the right solution to the problem. Should I go back to the issue and look at their steps to reproduce, or?
Yep, you could.
Okay. Just looking at the steps to reproduce, I think that there's a mistake here. In step 1, the first node should, the first version, the first revision should be published. And then in step 5, it will be immediately published.
Then it makes sense. But if you take in consideration that step 1 is draft, then step 5 is never be published automatically.
Right.
That was the point I tried to make, but yeah, no. The other way around, you've described it now. That makes sense then. Yep. And could you do one other thing, please?
Yep.
Go back to the Chin theme, the version, and go to and revert one of the one, and it doesn't matter which, just revert to anything that we just see the new interface, and now narrow down your window, though it is basically a mobile viewport. Just to
Use my browser tools for that.
more narrow, make it 300 pixels.
300?
No, not 300, but the small is possible. And then close the navigation sidebar. Because that is one of the main problems in regards of the H1. In particular in Chin, you, through that conversational style and front loading, are you sure you want to revert? don't see the CTA, you don't see the node, which is also not visible on on Claro, and you also don't see the appended date and timestamp. So we have no context at all, and also the breadcrumb only shows back to site. In Claro, you have basically more context. There you have basically the real breadcrumb with home, then the node name, and then revisions. And that way you have a completely generic confirmation form with no context at all visible. And that is one of the reasons. And we haven't got to basically wordsmithing a proper recommendation for that H1 in the first meeting. And in the second, we haven't got to it. And even if you see the whole length of the H1, still just the date and timestamp is a abstract concept and hard to get. And about the truncation, there's already an issue. It's issue number 3570087 for the Chin theme that deals
Okay,
with that.
let's compare that with what we get using Claro theme. So it's the same very long revision, same very long H1.
Yeah.
Um,
And above you have the breadcrumb with the node with test page v2. But that should, strictly speaking, be in the H1 as well. Otherwise, you don't know the context, and it's not in line with that WCAG success criteria.
okay, so in Claro it wraps, we still have the breadcrumb. So that seems to me like an issue for the theme rather than an issue for um, rather than being part of this issue.
Yeah, as I've said, it's basically the truncation is already taken care of, but still the length of that H1 is way too long. That are you sure you want to could simply be striked, for example, and front load the CTA of revert what you're doing, and then provide the context about the node and the revision.
Okay, so I guess I've said this before the last time we looked at this, that I don't like the approach of using the confirmation form this way. I think a confirmation form is an established pattern, and we shouldn't be adding additional form elements to a confirmation form. So I'd like to cancel this and think of other ways that we could make it a one-step process.
We've
So,
got revert. Can we revert and change status? So we could have revert or revert and revert as draft.
yeah, that's what I was thinking too, that we could have more links in these drop buttons. Um,
I guess that might become quite unwieldy if you have a lot of workflow states.
Yep.
Places that have in review, reviewed, trashed, archived. But I suppose you could revert as archived, revert as trashed.
And there's also the question if people will notice that there are more or different options between that you are able to revert to draft, you revert to published, and you revert to whatever other workflow state is there available there. So that might be also problematic.
We could have just one option, revert and change state. So that wouldn't be a confirmation form, but would be another form. So it adds a bit complexity so that you have two forms where you can revert, but in a way it would just make it a two-step process.
Okay, so let me respond first to the discoverability problem that people might not know. If the visible link mentions the workflow state, that I think suggests that there will be other options in the drop-down list. You know, revert as draft, revert as archived. Um, and then, so Simo, you think that to avoid the possibility of lots and lots of things in the drop-down list, you'd have one of the options being revert and change moderation state,
Yes.
which we can wordsmith, but basically that's what it would be. Um, and then that would go to one form where you choose the moderation state and then to a confirmation form.
Yeah, I think.
That could work. It's an extra page load compared to having the moderation states listed here. Um, I don't have a lot of experience with complex workflows. I've never seen more than 3 or 4 workflow states, but of course, we're going to limit this to the allowed transitions, I think. Well, maybe that's a good question. Should it be limited to allowed transitions or not? If it is limited to allowed transitions, that should cut down a little bit on the number of options in the list.
More sense than allowing people to revert as something that they can't access. We say that was expected behavior, that they could only revert to something they had permission to do to.
That's right. That's right. The proposed resolution, the list of available moderation states will be filtered to only include those that the user has the permission to transition to. Um, so, so that's really 2 restrictions. One, there might not be a transition in your workflow. There might not be a transition from draft to archived. And if so, and the revision is draft, then you won't have archived as an option. And secondly, there probably is a transition from draft to published, but the current user might not have permission to access that. So both there has to be a transition and then the user has to have access to that transition. And I wonder um, if that's a reasonable restriction or whether when you're reverting, you should have more freedom than when you're editing.
Should be at least configurable if there is more freedom. So because there may be states that will get the site very much broken if it's allowed to revert to a different state.
I think there's already permissions built into workflow, isn't there?
Yeah.
So
Aren't
you can set permissions so that some users only have permission to go to draft, only have permission, they can't publish.
Yeah. Aren't those basically the guardrails?
Mm.
So by providing more freedom, you could open a can of worms and more
I guess
problems.
it would be like that administer content kind of permission that as underneath it says only give this to uh,
So remember, there's a permissions form for just the workflows module. But I guess that's
if you go
well,
to configuration, I think it's built into the actual. Oh, there you go.
yeah. So it's the permissions for the content moderation module. For each transition, there's a permission to use that transition. And then there are a couple of additional permissions from the module. But for each transition, there's a
I think there's
related
already the
permission.
overarching one as well, which is administer work workflows, which will give you permission to kind of see everything.
So this permission actually
Uh,
overrides the other permissions.
not maybe it doesn't. Yeah, maybe you're.
Logically, it shouldn't.
Yeah, I
All right. So I guess the consensus I'm hearing from the people who have more experience than I do with content moderation is that we should keep these guardrails in place, that we should not give people uh, permission to revert to an arbitrary workflow state. That those transitions are defined for a reason, and we should respect that.
Yeah.
Somebody really needs that it's possible to override. So then it would need to be done on purpose.
Um, okay, so what do you think? Am I being too um, conservative, saying that I don't want to add additional elements to a confirmation form? Is the idea of adding additional links under here going to be too unwieldy?
personally, I don't. I think I'm with you. I don't like. It's a confirmation screen. It's not another web form. It's by definition, you should only be confirming that this is what you're doing.
And then there's also Simo's suggestion of doing neither of those, but inserting an extra step, um, revert and change, go to a form, select your moderation state, and then confirm. Go ahead, Ralph.
One thought, mixing basically the idea initially had and the point Simo made. How about the following? For revisions that are not published, simply have the revert button, and if you press that, you automatically basically set it to draft or the default one that that revision had. But for basically revisions that are not the current revision, but that, like in your example, with version 2 published, then have basically have a different kind of CTA that is called revert, and yeah, like Simo said, change state. And that way, it is clear that there has to happen some change. It is clear that it was published, and then you change it to something else. So basically, to combine both approaches, sort of, instead of having that option of changing the state for every um, revision that is available, which I don't consider necessarily helpful, and provide it only in the context where it's really necessary and could result in basically unexpected publishing.
Right. So the real problem we're trying to avoid here is creating a new published revision
Yeah.
that'll
Yep.
immediately become the current revision. Um, so what if we always used the default state? And I have a feeling that either it used to work this way or there was an issue to make it work this way. But if we go back to the configuration of workflows, um, let's see, we have
Down at the
three
bottom.
states, very bottom.
Yeah. There it is.
Yeah, there's the setting that when you create a new node, um, that it will be in the draft state, or you could choose another one. This state will appear as the default in content forms, and the available target states will be based on the transitions available from this state. Um, so the one thing I don't like about the suggestion you just made, Ralph, is that it's a little bit complicated to explain. You know, if it's published, do this. If it's not published, do that. And sort of, it would be simpler, maybe not better, but simpler, always to make a a reversion, a reverted revision, always set it to the default state, which in this case would be draft.
Only question is, I have also not the experience with complex content moderation workflows. So my worry might be that that approach might be too simplistic, meaning that it's not flexible then for some people and their needs. But I agree, it would be the easiest approach.
So I would like to do a little bit of research in this. And as I said, I think it used to work that way. Um, so I'd like to search for fixed issues that may have changed that. Um, does anyone feel strongly that one of the options we've discussed is the right answer and we should just go with that?
Not strongly enough to say anything.
Okay, so let's leave it here for now. Um, I guess I'll post a comment to the issue. I'll make that correction in the steps to reproduce, and I'll suggest the various options we've brought up. And then maybe over the weekend I'll try to find some time to look at the history. And as long as we're looking at revisions, let's continue the discussion from last week. This isn't the right issue. This is the same issue we've been looking at. Let's see. This is the issue for last week's meeting, so it should be linked from there. So this, for the sake of the recording, is issue 3580791. The edit button for a node with forward revisions on admin content does not communicate editing the latest revision instead of the expected current revision. And so if I go back to my Umami site and go to admin content, oh, did one of you create one of these?
Sorry,
See,
yeah, that might have been me. I was just testing out whether or not you had the published thing worked or not, and then left that one unpublished. So you were right that it doesn't
okay,
go to published if it starts as unpublished.
right. Okay, so you made an article, so it's easy to
Yeah.
keep them distinct. I was looking at a basic page. And then let's see, repeating something that I brought up last week. Revisions are complicated enough. Drupal enforces a linear history of revisions. You can't branch off from version 2 and have a tree of drafts and then publish one of them. Drupal enforces a linear revision history. So anytime you edit it, the only thing you're allowed to edit is the most recent revision. On the other hand, from admin content, um, the link in the title column goes to the most recent published version. I guess that's what's called the current revision on the revisions list. So what this issue is about is that it's confusing that the page you can view from this column and the revision you can view from this column and the revision you can edit from this column are different. You can view the current revision or you can edit the most recent revision, which might be a forward draft. And we talked last week about things we could change on the edit page. We talked about adding some additional information to this column to make it clearer. And one thing I'd like to talk about in the same vein is information we could add to the revision list. Um, to make it clearer. For example, I've been putting in my revision log messages, whether it's published or not. But should the moderation state be automatically added to the revision list? And just a second, Ralph, and that would also help with the issue we were looking at earlier. If you know that this revision you're about to revert to, if you know it's published, then you might avoid the problem of accidentally creating a new published revision. Is that what you were going to say, Ralph? I see you unraised your hand.
No, I just wanted to say basically add 2 or 3 additional rows with basically one column for the publishing state, one for the workflow, the content moderation state, and one column for the sequential revision number for that node, that concept we talked also about last week. So to provide more context.
So that would make this page more than double the number of columns. So one of them would be a very narrow column, just giving sequential number to each of these revisions. One at the bottom, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 going up. And then one page for the core published or not
Yeah.
flag, and then one page if content moderation is enabled, an additional column for the moderation state.
Yep.
And I know designers are often fans of combining information into one column, but I know you're strongly against that practice. So you'd really want 5 separate columns if content moderation is enabled.
Yep. Just to provide context, because I just recently, the other issue I've mentioned before, one person also made a comment in the same vein that basically on that revisions page with just the date and timestamp, there is not much context or to orient and what to do. And yeah, those states, publishing state and the workflow state, as well as some sort of a running number, sequential number, would be more than helpful.
Come to think of it, maybe this is getting outside the scope and should be a separate issue, but maybe you should have a chance to choose the revision log message when you revert.
That you're able to update it.
I think you can. If you try revert, I think it gives you the log box.
Oh, does it?
Is it?
When I was doing my,
So if I revert this,
maybe not. I thought, what was I doing? I was doing something that,
yeah, I can revert and then I can edit. And when I edit, I can make a new revision and put in my custom log message. And I can change the moderation state if I want.
I know what I was doing. Sorry. I was in the revisions page. If you click on the revision title, it actually allows you to change you can change the moderation state and log a message there.
Oh, does that work not just for the most recent revision? Oh, so that does not create a new revision.
I think it actually does.
Really? Hmm.
But you change the published state as well there.
Yes. can you do that for non-current revisions?
No, you have to revert, and then
Okay. There's no moderation state form here.
if you
No log message.
so if you revert one, it creates the revision, and then you can update the log message.
So actually, if I revert to a published version and confirm, then we have this problem that we've automatically created a new current revision. But oh,
Hmm.
why don't I see that?
Because it's published.
Ah, interesting. So I guess that provides yet another possible solution to the problem that um, yeah, if I had the option to go back to draft without creating a new revision and maybe editing the log message, if I always had that option, even for published, then for a few seconds there might be a published revision that I don't want to override the previous published version. But
Here's an interesting one. If you revert to draft, so say version 6 draft,
server this,
yep, I'm assuming that's still a draft, revert. Can you set that as a current revision?
That will open the confirmation form again.
yeah, that's actually reverting, which I think is a separate problem.
But if
But do you want me to go ahead and revert this?
yeah, revert it, because what it actually does is it just creates another revision.
Yes,
Exactly. Yeah, that's the one problem we already
Oh, yeah, okay.
listed. Yep.
but 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 since
These,
it's a draft, we're allowed to publish it with a new log message. But maybe this option should always be available, even for published revisions.
hmm. And potentially that set as current revision should not appear for drafts.
Hmm?
But then if you only have drafts and you want to revert the last draft, no.
Can't actually set that because it's a draft. We can't set it as the current revision.
So
So
current is always published.
I'm sorry, currently it's always published?
Yeah, I'm thinking that if you have a can you have a current revision that is draft and then you create a new draft and then you want to set the new draft as the current. So,
Okay, so let's see. This one down here is published. These two are not. So what do you want me to do?
I was
Use
thinking
this.
if we didn't have any that is published.
Hmm?
Okay, so I should start over and create a new node that doesn't have any. And we're getting close to the hour. And I want to respect your time. Unpublished, I meant. It's this draft. I'll save that. And then I will edit it and make it still. So here I have two revisions and they're both unpublished. And then what's your point, Simo? Oh, this is current even though it's still not published. And then there's no link to on this one to set it as the current revision. That's a little confusing.
Why confusing?
Okay, so I will make the comment that I suggested before, and we'll see. Maybe we'll get some responses from people who has recently been discussing this issue. Ralph, I see Bramley. I put a couple of comments on it.
How do we then I leave out basically because have the summary for the first two meetings still in underworks, and shall I simply leave out the question about the select element that you're covering now in the comment from today?
Yeah, and we shouldn't get to wordsmithing until we decide what approach to take.
Yeah, if there will be a confirmation form at all.
Yeah.
Will be the question. Yeah, then I make a comment at the end and leave out basically recommendations, refer to yours, and say the wordsmithing part is postponed until we get feedback on the points from today.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Thanks again for coming. And so next week, yeah, 2 weeks from now I won't be able to come, but I'll be here next week.
Okay, doke.
Take care.
Have a
Have a
nice
good weekend.
weekend. Bye bye.
That's
Bye.
fine. Bye.